very good evening, everyone, and we are really excited and to welcome you all to this session. And we trust that this session will contribute significantly to your professional journey. So, to make it more interactive, we have an engaging Q&A session planned at the end. So, have your questions ready. You can just type in the chat box. Our team from backend will be picking up the questions, and we'll cover it up at the end. So, I'll be your host for this session and introducing our esteemed guest for this evening, Mr. Somak Gupta, a seasoned professional with more than a decade experience, currently working as performance director at Atomic 212. So, welcome, Somak.
Thank you so much, Divya. Thanks for having me around.
Yes. So before we start with the agenda for the people who have joined the session for the first time, I would like to introduce you guys to our Remote Revolution series. So at Uplers, our mission is to streamline the hiring process, making it reliable, easy, and fast. And therefore, Remote Revolution is an initiative wherein we invite speakers from top-notch companies like Twilio, GitLab, Atlassian, and many more to share their insights on how these remote companies hire, their process, culture, values, interview tips, and remote readiness traits. So, our mission behind this initiative is to upskill you guys to get a job in a top remote brand. So, moving forward to the session agenda, Somak will take us through his journey. He'll share insights into his role. He'll talk about a unique culture at Atomic 212 and his experience working with a remote team. Next on the agenda, we'll be discussing about digital marketing in Australia and some key features of the markets and how we can leverage AI for digital marketing advancements. So, welcome, Somak. Without further delay, let's dive into the session. So, to start with, tell us something about your career and your journey at Atomic.
Thank you so much, Divya. The way you started, it actually sums up whatever I've done so far. Been working in this field for almost 10 years now. Started off when I was working in Merkel Socrates. At that time, it was Socrates, not Merkel. Then, lastly, I'm working with Atomic as the performance director based out of India. So here, what we are trying to do is to basically bring performance marketing to the clients who are based out of Australia primarily, and to an extension of the APAC as a region. Slowly, we will be trying to kind of have our footprint across the Indian subcontinent, and there onwards, the plan is to kind of expand however the business scenarios are presently offering. So that's something which we are doing. We are trying to kind of build in a team who are based out of India, because India, as we all know, it's a great country to have a lot of talents, and that's exactly been the top priority out here in Atomic. Been lucky to actually have worked on quite a lot of brands. Most of us might have used it at some point of time, like Titan or Kathleen, Maruti Suzuki, Zoyos and of the world. Was fortunate to kind of been given the responsibility to uh, invest millions of dollars in their ad spends to develop strategies for them, largely on the performance side of things, to bring in leads and transactions and values of the businesses over the years. Uh, so yeah, that's largely been the journey, and it has been a tough one because we have seen a lot of changes post the pandemic, wherein the entire scenario of marketing in general changed. The way people behave, the lifestyle, everything got changed. So that was a major kind of surprise, I would say. It also gave us the opportunity to kind of re-evaluate what kind of skills are required, and there onwards, the journey has been fairly different, and that leads us to this day, which in which we have something called AI, which is there. I mean, we will try to kind of cover a part of it, how it is helpful, and what are the things we should keep in mind while using the AI revolution where we are in. So that's how I think that would sum up a small intro about myself. Um, And just as a last point is that in terms of the session today, what we will try to do is to basically see what kind of skill sets are required for us to excel, not just for agencies based out of Australia, but in general, because these are basic and core aspects which are extremely important for anybody who is trying to foresee a future or career in this particular field, and that's going to be very helpful for anybody who is trying to pursue their career in this field. And that is, we'll try to kind of make it very simple to encompass my experience of almost 10 years in the next around 50 minutes or so. So it's a uphill task. Hopefully, will not bore you guys out and have a little more productive session at the end of the day.
Great. Thank you so much, Sumak, for sharing your journey with us. And I'm sure we learn a lot from you. So moving on to the next slide. As this slide says, how to find and get hired for a remote job. So many people find the job application process challenging and often face rejections or lack of responses after applying to numerous companies. So based on your experience, what are the key areas that candidates should concentrate on during their job search? So could you provide some specific advanced strategies to help our audience improve their chance of success?
No, absolutely. I think this is a little more relevant question in our today's time because things have changed dramatically post pandemic, and the narratives have also changed. Work from home or work from anywhere, which is remote working, has been the preferences across the board because it kind of showed how things can be done without possibly getting into a 9 to 5 kind of a restriction. I think largely it all starts from what you want to pursue, and there onwards, you have amazing platforms like Uplers. I mean, your platform is great. LinkedIn again is something which we should be able to kind of take advantage of while searching for the job which we are trying to do. But I think the most important part of the journey is to basically understand what you want to do, because right now we are in living in a world wherein we have so many fancy designations which often gets misleading, right? So that becomes a very important I mean part of the journey. Right now, a performance marketeer or a digital marketeer can be synonymous with something like a growth marketeer. It sounds fancy, but it's essentially the same thing, right? So you need to know what you want to do. And then there's something called social media, and then something called influencer marketing. Then there's something called content. Then there's something called SEO. So all are part of the equal, I mean, the same family, but it is very important for us to know what we are trying to pursue and then look out for platforms which usually would have those kind of jobs available. And that's a reason I would again like to call out Uplers, because I think you guys have a lot of uh, opportunities which you guys are working on to create those opportunities rather for people out of for the companies out of India when they want to hire talents. And I think that's where key understanding of what's the requirement, because it should not happen that you talk yourself out through the interview, and when the actual work comes in, it's a completely different ball game altogether. So that's another reason why we see a lot of people leaving the job not satisfied, because it's basically a mismatch of all sorts of expectation. So I think that's basically the first step, to understand what you want to do, where you want to land, and have a slightly long-term perspective. When I say long-term, it's not 5, 10 years now. It's going to be a couple of years, because that's how job ecosystems are changing these days. So at least you should have a clear path of what you need to do for the next 2, 3 years, and then obviously start the job hunt from platforms like Uplers. And then LinkedIn is a slightly more generic platform, but yeah, it's definitely a pretty vast network of corporates, companies, and people looking out for jobs. So it's always going to be very important for anybody who is seeking for jobs. I think that's the first point. And I think moving on, what's more important is to be updated with what is happening. Um, around our uh, day-to-day lives, around the market, around the political scenarios, right? Everything impacts a marketeer in this world, right? Everything. Like recently, we had the budget, and we are seeing how the market, the stock market, and everything is reacting to it. Uh, every single thing which is happening around us potentially defines how people are changing their decision, how they're evolving, or how they're processing the information which is required for them to ultimately go out and buy something. I mean, it's a consumer oriented market. Without consumers, there is no need for any marketeer, right? So uh, there is a bit of consumerism involved in this particular aspect, and that's the reason it is very, very important for us to keep a basic track. You do not have to be a expert of some sort in market trends or current affairs, but at least to know what's happening around makes a huge difference between somebody who is just talking about the basics of of any marketing, or somebody who is informed about the market, and that adds a lot of value. I'll give a quick example. For example, you are somebody who is based out of, say, Madhya Pradesh, just a random example, and somebody who wants to kind of grow the market, uh, FMCG company wants to grow their market share in Madhya Pradesh. Now, if you know the typical behavior, what's happening around Madhya Pradesh, what are the typical things which you see around Madhya Pradesh, would be the difference between a success and a failure, or at least a workable strategy when it comes down to marketing. So that's very important. Just to people, I mean, the basic thing: read news and just keep your eyes and ears open. Would request rather to kind of stay little more informed in terms of reading. I think reading is a much better way of gaining that knowledge, and then have platforms like YouTube to use those things as to kind of have informative videos, and audiobooks are something which is also very handy these days. So I think these are a few things which I personally use to keep myself updated, although it's very distracting of late because we have so many things like reels and social media in general. But I think the trick is to basically be updated. I mean, you have to find the opportunity within the entire ecosystem. A few people can say that social media is distracting. It is, but it is also one of the biggest source where people get a lot of business generation. Meta is a classic example, right? So I think keeping yourself updated with current affairs, the market trends, the sentiments, just talk to people, just go to the regular kirana stores near you, talk to the auto rickshaw wallahs, and so on and so forth. You will get a lot of knowledge which is happening, and that is where I think the myth and the reality check comes into the picture and makes us a better marketeer at the end of the day. Uh, just to put perspective, things into perspective, I think 5% of the entire Indian population is something which is considered to be the cream of consumers, right? Like almost 45% of the entire country's wealth is accumulated within the top 5% of the country. But because India's own population is staggering, the 5% also becomes a substantial number, right? And then rest of the 95%, although is it doesn't have that bigger purchasing power, but it's a considerable number. I mean, it's bigger than most of the developed economies put together in terms of sheer population, and that's the level where India can be looked into. I mean, just don't get swayed by the fact of what's happening around you. India runs pretty deep, and that has been pretty amazing the way it has evolved, and it's continuing to evolve. I mean, we have extensive network of mobile phone, but we do not have extensive, means to kind of have basic amenities. So that kind of speaks the volume about how diverse the market is, and it is only going to benefit us when we are strategizing at some point of time for bigger companies who is seeking our opinions to get down to those factors that this makes a lot of difference in your whatever you're thinking and whatever you're strategizing. I think that's pretty important to keep yourself updated. Moving on, the third point largely would be to have a very strong subject matter knowledge, right? There is no substitute of that. And that's the reason it is strongly advised, whatever field you are in, it may be SEOs or SEMs or social media or influencer, but whatever is the starting point, have as much clarity and as much knowledge of the things which you are doing. Keep yourself have an open mind approach regarding that thing, but because marketing is completely subjective, right? I may say that, okay, let's go ahead with this ABC strategy. You may say that let's go ahead with XYZ. There is no right or wrong approach to it, but having a strong fundamentals actually helps you to have a logical approach to it. I think we are going to talk about those things in details with examples. But the larger point is to have a very strong subject matter. Uh, what I have seen in the recent couple of years is that a lot of people would refer to few reels and few videos which they have seen online, and then they would start calling themselves marketeers, which is good, which is great to start things off with. Especially if you're confident enough to talk about anything. I mean, you can use AIs to draft you a piece of content, and you can blabber about it. But that only will take you to certain distance, right? It will not take you home. And the only difference is that you have to expose yourself. You have to keep yourself updated on what's happening. Say with the likes of Google doing some major changes in its algorithm that impacts how the SEO is going to get impacted. Google Ads, for example, how it changes. What are the new things which are getting done? What are the critical things which are happening around? So all those things have to have a very patient and a slightly long-term mindset oriented approach. Otherwise, there is no substitute to that knowledge gain. I mean, you will have to get yourself get your hand dirty to know all those details. Work on as much as possible, as many problem statements as possible. That refines you. I mean, that keeps you sharper at any given point of time. So I think that's the reason subject matter knowledge is very, very important um, to kind of last the long race. I mean, it's a marathon at the end of the day. It's not a 100-meter sprint. So you will have to have that knowledge depth to last the entire run which you are trying to do. So I think that's the reason subject matter knowledge is very, very important. And I think the last point for a successful job hunting is going to be a strong communication. Speaking English fluently with an accent, not with an accent, depends on you how you have been influenced. Is not a parameter of a strong communication. I mean, that has been the illusion for a long time, especially for people based out of India. But rather, what has been asked or said, and then what is your interpretation of that, and how you respond to that, and if people are understanding what you're trying to say, are the basis of a strong communication, right? So what is the point of talking about anything in a manner which nobody understands, right? Now, a very good orator, English orator like Sashi Tharoor, he speaks fantastically. I mean, he's probably one of the best English speakers around the world. But what's the point if half of what he says is not understood by 90% of the people? I mean, you need to have a dictionary to just kind of get an idea of what he's trying to say and what is the context of it. So, communication doesn't mean fluency of the language or the command over the vocabulary, but the simplest possible way how you can explain what you're trying to explain to the other person who is in front of you. Now, if you sum it up, it essentially is what marketing is about, right? Say there is a product or a service, and you basically have to sell that product. If you can't speak to the target customer, if you can't communicate that thing to the target customer, what's the point? So I think that is the most understated point, which often gets overlooked. It's the fact that anybody who is into marketing needs to have a strong, very strong, and very clear kind of communication skill. I think the best part to how to kind of hone this skill is to talk, have discussions within your spheres, have discussions, go to listen to people, what they are trying to say, how they are trying to elaborate a particular thing, what kind of examples they are taking. Uh, Take examples from day-to-day life and then try to summarize what you have seen or what you have observed. Write down those things which you have seen around in a diary just to kind of sum everything up. Writing actually helps a lot. I mean, we usually do not write as often, which we used to. You can call us being lazy or being overtly surrounded by technology, but I think writing definitely helps a lot. If not writing, then typing definitely helps a lot. If not typing, then recording yourself to whatever you have seen in a day or an interesting thing which you have observed. It helps a lot. Now, once you record and then you listen back to yourself, you will see that maybe not the way I imagine myself to speak, right? So these are small things which really kind of goes a long way in creating a lasting impression to whomsoever you are trying to communicate, especially during an interview. An interview is essentially the place wherein you have to showcase your skills, a place wherein you need to communicate, you need to showcase, and you need to kind of say ascertain that values that okay, this is what I know, this is what I believe in, this is how I am telling you that I am good enough for the job. So I think the sum of four, how you start your journey and the relevant platforms to look in to kind of hunt the job, and then to have a fair amount of understanding of what's happening around us, uh, a credible amount of knowledge on whatever you are doing or whatever you have started doing, and then to top it off with how simply you can put it so that the other person in front of you understands what you're trying to say, can be a good mix to basically crack the job, any job for that matter.
Great. Thank you so much, Somak, for sharing your insights. And I'm sure these insights will be very helpful for all the people who have joined this session. So moving on, um, yes. So learning about the company's history, industry reputation, and performance give us insights into stability and overall standing. So customizing our application and interview process based on our knowledge of the organization helps us a lot. So with keeping this in our mind, Soma, could you share something about or some insights about Atomic 212 as an organization?
Absolutely, I'll do that. I'd love to do that. Atomic is a great place. Been associated with Atomic for almost 2 years now. It's based out of Sydney now. We have expanded beyond that. We have offices around Melbourne, Darwin, and Brisbane. So there are four places out of Australia which we operate. Uh, and I think Atomic has a very simple mindset or point of view, narrative, idea rather, is that uh, think smart, largely do a smart work, do it faster, and be accountable for it. And I think that kind of sums up everything. We do not have those instances wherein it's a bureaucratic kind of thing. You have an idea, and it takes ages for you to kind of get to your manager, discuss it out, get an approval. Then that person goes to his manager, and then keeps on happening until the time it get approves and things already have passed its own sweet spot. Right. So that's where Atomic is very different. It's kind of built into uh, have a very performance specific outlook. So it started off as a performance first agency, and right now we are kind of doing everything from performance to branding solutions. And I think the latest one which we are trying to do is to do a bit of OHH, OOH, sorry. And that's where we are trying to kind of keep ourselves updated to the trends which we are seeing in the market, primarily out of Australia. And yeah, I think that's where we are trying to excel. Excellence is something which we rather focus on. We would largely have people, smart people, do the job rather than being told what to do. And that's the flexibility which I have seen. Really enjoy that particular bit. I think summing up about Atomic would be it's a great platform if you are uh, trying to start up with your career because it provides a very good mix of people from around the world. I mean, we have people working out of who are Australian, who are Indian out of Australia, uh, Philippines, Taiwanese, Chinese, you just name it. I mean, we have probably the most unique composition of people from all sorts of people from around the world. My manager is out of England. He is now based out of Australia. So you see, there's a huge amount of cultural influx which happens within the atomic ecosystem, and that not only enriches you, but it also kind of helps the other person to understand what exactly happens. So I think that would be my 2 cents on how Atomic is, and just one liner on the interview process. A typical interview process uh, is a very simple one. I think you have the basic introduction round wherein you kind of talk yourself out, whatever you believe in, whatever you have done, your experiences, and so on. Then there is a slightly more difficult interaction in terms to your subject matter. Say you're opting in for a channel expert. It can be any channel. And then you if you have certain amount of experience, say more than 5 years or so, then how good your strategy is, what kind of strategy work you have done. And then there is a fundamental round, which is essentially a presentation making round, case study making round. So there are a set of questions or one primary questions broken down by multiple questions, which can be on top of the slides. Uh, you are given a couple of days to kind of make those assumptions and estimates and then fill out a proper PPT kind of a format and then present it out in front of, say, a panel of 3 people or 4 people. So that's something it really helps to kind of gauge that person and we firmly believe that interview process is not a one-way process, it's a two-way process. So uh, it's not just for us to judge or take a call of the fitment for the candidate, but it is also a platform for the candidate to understand and see whether that particular role or that particular company, this particular company is important for your career growth or not. It if any of it is a misfit, then it's strongly advised to kind of be upfront about it, right? And that's something which we believe in, and that's something which we try to kind of maintain it across all throughout the journey of anybody who is applying or interacting for an interview purpose. So I think yeah, that's about Atomic in general. Uh, I think I've just included the cultures and the values across uh, being collaborative, being understanding, and the fact that we are working out of different time zones make it very unique kind of experience, right? So I mean, the most common thing is I find something which is important for somebody who is based out of Australia, who usually is around 4.5 hours ahead of us. So if I find something, I kind of flag it and by the time they join in the next day, which is around 4:30 a.m. India, they kind of keep a track of it, get it done before the client. So it always kind of keeps around the clock vigilant from people around the different time zones which you're working on. So that's is a very unique place to be. I'm really grateful that been part of ACMIC and also the fact that we are based now, we are trying to kind of expand our team based out of India. So it's a very unique time and opportunity out here in ACMIC.
Great. So thank you for sharing this information. It's quite impressive how your agency has evolved to offer comprehensive marketing solutions. So moving on, let's go to our next slide. So, knowing about companies' culture and values is very important. People usually focus on the technical aspects of the interview, but knowing about the culture and value is equally important for ensuring that your personal values align with the company's values. So, over to you, Somak.
Yeah, I'll probably sum it up pretty quickly because I have, I think, elaborated on how my experience on Atomic has been in general. I mean, culture and value can be summed up from the vision, right? So the vision is very straightforward. It's to basically work with smart people, uh, people whom we can empower to take the correct decision, to take the decision for the client, which is beneficial for the client, and then to collaborate. Generally, that is something which we firmly drive in our teams to collaborate, be it anything, it can be anytime. The ease of reaching out to somebody is a very significant, a comfort which you have working out of Atomic. I mean, say in a media agency, there are a lot of instances wherein you genuinely and innocently make mistakes, and any mistakes can be worth a lot of money, advertisement money, which is coming out of your client. So that's something which happens, which has happened, which will continue to happen. And that is the best part. So even if you are unsure about anything, you can reach out to anybody from any part of the organization, be it the CEO or be it any of the high ranking one or any of your peers at any given point of time. It not only opens up your perspective, but it also gives you the idea to handle with that particular situation, no matter how worse the situation is. So, so I think that's the beauty of the culture which we have at Atomic.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So now that we know about the organization, its culture, values, let's move on to the next crucial bit: skills you look for in an ideal candidate. In this slide, Somak will be covering the key qualities for success in Australian agencies. So over to you, Somak.
Yeah, I think this is the most important part of of any agency, not just Australian agency. I think uh, any agency around the world would look for this set of qualities, which are largely summed up with logic and assumption, then data interpretation. The most important one being the understanding or having the understanding of the client requirement, and then documentation and then prioritization, right? So it becomes more important for the Australian agencies is because and from a perspective of people who are trying to get into Australian agencies who are based out of India specifically, because I think there is a fundamental cultural barrier difference, not barrier but difference. So it is very important for us to have a crystal viewpoint of what is that we are trying to talk about, what are the things, what are the context of what is happening, and whether whatever we are doing is in line with the requirement or not, right? That is where the interpretation of what is being asked is of key importance. And then obviously what happens is that in marketing, a lot can be subjective. So a proper way of having it documented really not just helps you, not just helps the client, but in general as a project, even if it's a failure, well documented campaign details or details around it helps you to not make those mistakes again, right? So documentation is very important. From a culture point of view, we are taught to kind of do long hours of job and so on and so forth in India, and in Australia it's very simple. This is your work. These are the requirements. This is the timeline. Get it done, right? So this is the fundamental difference between the approach of these two countries, India and Australia. And I think this is a brilliant way of empowering anybody who is kind of getting into it. but then to do it properly is what is very, very important. So I'll jump on to the 4 points one by one. I think the most important one to succeed in any of the digital marketing agencies or marketing agencies is to have a clear logic and very near perfection kind of assumptions, right? The assumption should not be something which is above your head or it's completely beyond the market trends, right? So we'll start off on that part. If you can just move to the next one. Yeah, great. The previous one. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. So let's take an example. So what happens is, let's say we are launching a new marketing campaign, right? Now, launching of marketing campaign or any campaign for that matter involves a lot of financial commitment, right? So most of the brands, most of the companies would want it to be a success. Who doesn't want to be successful? Everyone wants to be successful. I haven't heard about anybody who is like, okay, let's spend this much amount and be a failure. Uh, let the campaign fail, right? It's absolutely a must have to success. Now, how would we succeed in this particular scenario? Let's take a very basic example that okay, what's trending these days? Let's take the example of a beauty cream, fairness cream, right? Now, we have to launch this beauty cream in Indian market. Now, if your assumption is that Indians are not very savvy about how they look, and then you try to kind of do something out of the box to make that particular marketing campaign, it's not going to work. If your assumption is not correct, it's not going to work. For you to basically be successful around this particular campaign, you'll have to basically go out, do the market research, talk to 5 people, understand what the requirement is, what the trends are, and then make a recommendation on the basis of that particular assumption. And obviously, it has to be logical, right? Now, if you have money, like I think the Ambani weddings is a classic example. For nothing, they spent crores on that particular wedding, and it got publicized. Now, just imagine it from a small scale brand, a smaller brand. Uh, they would take ages to be in the highlight, in the limelight of the people before they kind of start getting a reputable number of transactions, which they are craving for. But they lack that vast amount of financial resource, right? So there has to be a somewhat safer approach which you need to take to kind of have a certain amount of assured success. Like we know it for a fact that if somebody is interested in a product, that person is going to search for the product, or that person is going to ask the Kirana store owner to give you that product. Now, if this is a logic, then probably there is somewhat of a success which we can assure. But if the logic is like, okay, fine, till that point, 100 crore people doesn't see the product in front of their television for more than 5 times, it's not going to be a successful campaign. The logic and the assumption in this particular case is, I would not say it's a very practical one. So it has to be practical, it has to be designed for that particular problem statement. And for that, if we go back, if we recollect what we spoke in the initial part of our today's session, that having an understanding of the current trends which are happening around us, having a interaction with people around us, not just from within our circle, but going above and beyond that, really helps you to kind of clear out what kind of assumptions to take, what kind of logics to apply, thereby, minimizing or mitigating those risk factors which can be around this particular campaign, right? For all the startups and the small brand, this is very, 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 very important. All the SMEs. and the small scale people, because the financial resources are limited and they would want to make the most out of it. And that's probably one of the reason you would see that most of the fashion and beauty brands which are targeted towards women are doing a very aggressive kind of campaign on social media with the likes of influencer campaigns, with the likes of reels, because that's where a lot of the target audiences are engaged these days, right? So those assumptions and the logic behind those assumptions are very, very important um, to succeed in this particular world of digital marketing in large, and I think performance marketing in particular. Um, and the basis of all this logic and assumption is essentially the data which we are looking around. So if you can just move to this part. Yeah. Now, there are two types of data, in my opinion. One is something which you read, you study, and then you analyze it, and the one which basically is something which you observe. And then that's basically something which is notional, right? Um, so, how do you differentiate between those two? It may feel that this pink is a color, say, of a choice for women, a generalist view, as a example, if I may put it. Now, this is my assumption, and my basis of the assumption is on the vague observation that I've seen most of my friends from female circle, excuse me, to have that kind of preference. Now, is this notional data correct or not? Is something which is very important. That's where hard data is very, very important for us to read. Now, when you're analyzing any campaign or any piece of anything for that matter, it becomes very, very important for us to first ask the question, why are we looking into the data? What is the point? Why are we doing this thing? What is the objective out of it? And is there any problem statement which we are trying to solve for? If you do not have these questions, just looking into the data would not give anything, right? It's just going to be a waste of time. So say for example, you have a big campaign going on, right? And then at the overall level, the data looks fine. I mean, your cost per transaction is say 25 rupees. Everything is great. People are appreciating. But now and then, when you kind of look beyond that overall data and you kind of break it down into the different region-wise data, you see that possibly the eastern side of the country is not performing as well as the western side, the northern side not performing as well as the southern side. That means that now you have an opportunity to basically uh, course correct that particular campaign. Why are you taking this decision? Why are you taking this approach? Because now the question which you are asking is, how can I make my campaign better? That is basically the question which you are trying to chase. And data is essentially helping you to get those information to take that corrective action, right? So that is where data interpretation is extremely important, and not just the overall data, but essentially you will have to drill down the data. So as to have absolute clarity of what is happening. We have a slightly different approach out here. What we are trying to do is, if you can move to the next slide, we'll take an example, right? Now, within this, we have four slides. No, no, just wait, just wait for that. Yeah, it's great. So, if some of us are aware of the digital marketing terms, we have something basics like impression clicks, CPC, cost per click, CTR, which is click through rate, conversion rate, and then Google ad conversion on a weekly basis, and the CPL which is there. Now, if this is your data, you see that the last week, the last part of the data for the CPL, that suddenly there is a spike. And then on the left side of the conversion rate table, you see that there is a drop in that exact same week. Now, what is your interpretation out of this thing? That something possibly has gone wrong in the landing page or something, right? The website got some bit of a technical flag, and that's the reason the conversion rate has actually gone down. There is not a major flag in the ad because your CPCs and CTRs are kind of in the similar range. There is a bit of CTR, but it's kind of in the similar range. So that is my overall understanding of this particular data. Now, if I just take a call on this particular data, I may or may not be correct. And that brings us to the remaining part of the data. Now, if you can just, yeah, and the next one, correct, great. Now, we all know that a search campaign can be typically of three types, which is a brand, non-brand, or a generic and a competitor one. So we are just going to take the example of a brand and a non-brand campaign. Now, here we see that the brand conversion rate is something which is dropping, but the non-brand one are not dropping that much. So now with this new piece of information, our interpretation of that same old data has a new definition altogether, right? So this is exactly what I was trying to kind of explain, that just don't go with the overall data or just go with the notional data. Validate it. Just go one step down, so that you know each and every part of the construct of the data, and that is always going to help us get ourselves closer to the reality as much as possible. So I think this is a classic example of how we often misjudge the data by looking into certain silos of the data, but it's always advisable to kind of look into the overall picture. And of course, it has to be from a start point of what is the objective, what are we trying to solve out of the data, what is the expectation out of the data. Then only looking into the data actually makes a lot of sense, right? Now, having said that, once we understand the data, it is also important for us to understand what the client needs. Now, say for example, the ask is to develop a new ad campaign. The client wants that most number of people, majority of the people, should know about their brand. Now, we suddenly start to kind of give a random set of recommendation, like, okay, let's do reels, let's do Shopify kind of ads, let's do Spotify ads, Snapchats, and so on and so forth, randomly without asking for any other details. That hyper excitement would not help us in this particular case, right? So what happens is that you will have to ask client a question. So, what is your budget? If you have 100 rupees as your budget, then you will have to suggest things which are appropriate to that budget. Uh, Now, if somebody has a 10,000 rupees budget, then the scope of work changes. The scope, the buffer changes. Everything associated with this particular problem statement changes. So asking questions to clarify what exactly is the requirement, be it of a campaign, be it of certain data, be it of a problem statement. And this is typically something which is very, very important in an interview situation as well. If you are given a problem statement or you're given a question, it is very important for us to ask as much questions as possible, relevant questions, of course, not silly ones, relevant questions, just to get to the core of it. Asking questions helps you to kind of gather enough amount of information to help you a very easy way to get those answers. You know exactly where to look into. Otherwise, it is going to be a huge area to cover. Now you have basically brought down that scope, and now you know exactly what needs to be the direction which you have to work. So I think understanding the client requirement has a big part of asking those relevant questions to the client, um, and uh, and ask questions. I mean, with whatever, however nominal it can be, just like what's the budget? When do you want to start the campaign? It kind of unlocks a lot of values, not just for you but also for the client. From a client's perspective, it always helps you to showcase that you're concerned, you know what you're asking for. You need uh, a spot on kind of a brief to kind of start working on whatever problem statement you're working on. So understanding the client requirement has a lot of domino effect in terms of whatever you're doing. It helps you to plan better. It helps you to then ask the right questions once the data comes into it, and then also correct those campaigns later on. So client requirement will be that particular gambit. Now, moving on from there, so far, whatever we have talked about is essentially creating that particular impression of what we know and what we do not know. Documenting all those things in a proper manner helps us to basically create a fail proof, foolproof kind of a scenario, a system, right? Um, I may mean something and it may be interpreted in a certain way. To avoid that gap in interpretation or communication, documentation, and then prioritizing on those documentation helps a lot. See what happens in a culturally different ecosystem like that of Australia, wherein they would give you that responsibility and expect you to get done with it within the time frame. It is very important for you to write down what is needed, and if there are multiple things which are needed, which is to be given first, right? Nobody is going to come back to you and say that, wait, what's happening? Have you done with it, right? And so on and so forth. So that's not going to happen. At the end of the deadline, they're going to come and say that what's the status of this particular thing. So to avoid any miscommunication, misinterpretation, documentation, and then on top of the documentation to analyze which is the most important part of it, prioritizing it, and then communicating that entire piece uh, with each other is again a very important part, which is evaluated during your interview process. If you recap to the part wherein we were speaking about uh, how it is important for us to kind of make a presentation out of a case study and so on and so forth, that is exactly where we kind of evaluate whether you are able to document those nitty-gritties properly or not, whether you can prioritize those problem statements or not, and so on and so forth, because time essentially is a very important factor, and then it has to be done in a proper way. So, summing all those four pointers, which is logic and assumption, you need to have a correct assumption and a logical approach to any problem statement. Back it up by data and not just by the superficial or notional data. Just go one step deeper into it and then understand and ask questions around the problem statement as much as possible to kind of narrow down the scope of work, and then obviously to document everything so as to not just help the other one understand better and also to help you prioritize things better. Essentially are the four pillars which I actually follow to basically be successful in any agencies, not just the Australian agencies, but any agencies of anything around the world.
Great. Thank you so much. So let's come to the last point of this presentation. Um, so, in this slide, it is mentioned using AI to our advantage. So, as we all know that AI is cut like as AI continues to drive significant advancement, we are curious about its role in digital marketing. And how do you think we can leverage AI to gain a competitive advantage in this field?
It's a I think it's an industry-wide question how AI has been doing its round of the news. But I think AI at this point of time, it's in a nascent stage right now. It's not pretty advanced right now, but it is definitely growing with every passing moment. Um, what I do as a marketeer, I use AI to essentially help me save time to kind of do a lot of things which helps me kind of save the time. When most part of the PPT, this particular PPT was done with the help of a bit of AI. That's a revelation. So that kind of helps you, all right? You do not have to make 10 sliders. You just kind of give certain prompts and the AI does it for you, essentially making it beautiful in a way which is consumable for the end audiences. So I do it for that, and I also kind of do it largely for summarizing the reports. I can simply upload a piece of data to something like ChatGPT and kind of help summarize a lot of those reports, helps me to cut a lot of times which I would have to do manually otherwise. Like, in an Excel, you put those things, create a table, then chart out of it, a graph out of it, and so on and so forth. So all those things can be done quite easily with the help of AI. I think the place where we go wrong largely as marketeer while using AI is the fact that we try to use it for creative aspects, like writing copies for our ad campaigns, or designing few things on our ad campaigns. That is essentially a creative thing. That is where we need the human value, the imagination, and so on and so forth. The run of the mill things can be done via AI, but I think the core creative thing needs to be done as humanly as possible, and then all those repetitive tasks which takes a lot of time otherwise, it's not a question of your efficiency, but it genuinely takes those times. But AI can actually help us cut down those time period by a lot of margin. So I think that's where AI really helps us to kind of get a little more efficient. uh, so I think that is how I would use AI. If you move on to the next part, AI is already kind of being used right now. Be it, I mean, we have put in an example of Google Ads and Facebook ads out here. So all these things like dynamic search ads or TCPAs or uh, the bidding strategies, which are like you put in a bidding strategy to the Google ad and you give an input, and it automatically starts to give you those numbers by analyzing the metadata and so on and so forth, the user level data. And so it's for Facebook, you have those lookalike audiences, the automated ad placements. You do not have to do anything with Advantage Plus kind of a campaign, right? So this is how AI has been there in the things which we are already doing. I think that's something which will continue to get even more dramatic in terms of how the campaigns are set up. But it is us to make those decisions. The decision making on top of those smaller silos is something which would make a much larger impact to the overall campaign. Otherwise, if you ask me, creating a campaign and going live is something which has been made very simple by the help of those AI enablement, and across all those leading platforms like Google, Facebook ads, or for that matter, LinkedIn ads. In fact, Uplers, you also have the AI-driven shortlisting process for all the candidates. So AI is there. It's essentially helping you cut down on those manual things which would have otherwise taken a slightly longer time to do, right? So that's how things are. Just I think a quick example of what I did do rather to kind of get done with this AI is to basically, as I told, upload a piece of Excel, give a prompt, and then automatically within like few seconds, I'll have literally the graphs and entire summary of the report. So that's how I kind of keep my efficiency level a little higher. And that's where I think AI can be beneficial, cut down the times for doing those rudimentary work.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. With this, we come to the end of the presentation, and thank you so much. You have certainly shared a lot of insights with us. So I know we are like we have crossed the session limit, but it's okay. We still have few minutes in which we can ask the questions. So we already have few questions in the chat box. So let's pick it up.
Would you
Yeah, I'm
uh,
sharing the questions with you. So we have a question which is how a fresher can crack remote jobs. All the remote jobs we usually see requires experience. So what is your take on it?
how freshers can apply? See, the fundamental part of remote work is essentially a trust factor. I mean, that's one of the reason why a little more experienced people are being taken into consideration at this point of time, because uh, from certain amount of experience, it's clear that that person can be considered for that job, because you're not in front of the other person or the organization. It's going to be very difficult for anybody to gauge or engage for that matter, and see whether it's a correct fitment or not. And that's probably one of the reason why we have so fewer number of fresher jobs. But I think having small, projects or assignments which you have done, creating a small bit of portfolio, writing a bit of case studies, can actually open up those opportunities, because the moment you have those things and use AI, ChatGPT, etc., for the research purpose, not to create the entire document, right? Just to kind of have your point of view, what you believe is the proper fitment, um, can open up that particular piece. So basically, have a portfolio, have a set of case studies which you have created. It need not be a very in-depth one, but just a basic one. Like for example, why Jew is failing. Your take onto it, right? And you just put in a nice one pager. So those basically helps to substitute the lack of visibility which an experienced person would have.
Okay, thank you for answering that. So, we have a question which is, can you suggest some tools which people can use for the advancements which you were talking about in the previous slide?
Right. I think I typically use ChatGPT, and I've recently started using the paid version of it because it's fun. I mean, I just started exploring it just for the pure fun of it. But it's amazing because it kind of helps you break down a lot of things. It's slightly more real time. The free version is it has a data restriction which is limited to a while back. So I use ChatGPT and a bit of Gemini AI, because I kind of use it to summarize the key things, key information which is happening around, or to kind of make the repeated task. So it's focused on these two tools at this point of time. Um, I mean, we are all surrounded by a lot of AI things any which ways, because on Google ads or Facebook ads, which is primarily the bread and butter of what we do, uses a lot of those AI features already. So we do not have to look beyond those things. The reports are already automated. You have those brilliant visuals. It's just to kind of make your own life easy. So I think it's a host of tools. Just go onto the website and just search for whatever tool excites you. But yeah, the only thing is that it's still in its nascent stage. So commanding whatever you need out of that as an output is essentially the make or break difference between a successful outcome of that particular prompt or not. So just play around with it. I think it's fun. I mean, it's informative and fun at the moment.
Great. So we have another question, which is any advice you would like to give to target Australia time zone remote jobs?
It's a it's a typical thing which we face because our 9 a.m. is essentially the 4:30 a.m. and then it becomes slightly more complicated with something called daylight saving. Uh, it is there. I mean, I do not know why it is there, but it's still there. So essentially, this is a problem with any of um, the remote job which is having any time zone difference of more than 2.5 hours. We at Atomic, what we are trying to do is to basically bridge that gap and have a 7 a.m.-ish kind of a check-in, so that it's humane. It's not completely beyond attempt, but then it also gives us an additional couple of hours after hours for Australia, so as to kind of complete and have few things ready for the team based out of Australia to take an attempt when they resume their office at 4:30 a.m. India time. So it's a bit of a compromise, but um, I think this is the nature of the job. If it is based off Australia or US for that matter, it's going to be even crazier. So time, unfortunately, can't be controlled. It depends on the organization whether you can work on your time or there can be a subtle solution around it.
Great. Let's pick the last question for today, which is how does the agency build and maintain strong relationship with the clients?
I mean, evolving kind of a relation. It's just not a stagnant one, right? So, I mean, the agencies, especially in today's world, it had to evolve post-pandemic because I mean, before pandemic, Google Ads used to have a specific skill set. Right now, most of the things which we used to do as marketer back then are already automated. You know, writing ad copies haven't been easier. Choosing a particular bid strategy hasn't been easier. So a lot of things have already evolved, but I think the better way to deal with any client is to basically engage at a business problem solution level, because businesses keep on evolving, and that's where uh, the partnership essentially is strengthened by the fact of your ability to solve for those business challenges. I'll give it a quick example. Like before pandemic, the e-commerce in certain ways used to behave in a very different tangent altogether. Um, Post pandemic, there has been a lot of e-commerce and a lot of rental based businesses which have actually gone out of business, right? So why did it happen? It happened largely because of the fact that the business did not evolve as per the change in the market dynamics. Had it had that particular support to evolve, it would have done it, right? So I think largely that is the bigger question, whether to kind of engage at a tactical level or a strategic level. The deeper your relations go with the client, I think the better possibility you have to kind of retain it over a larger period of time.
Great. With this, we can end this session. And I know we have a lot of questions in the chat box which are not answered, but I'm sure we'll be sharing our Discord link with Somak, and you guys can also join our Discord community where you can put your questions, and I'm sure Somak will be answering it. So, thank you so much, Somak. We truly value the insights you have shared with us, and thank you for dedicating your time to help our community grow. We truly appreciate your efforts.
Thank you so much, Divya, for having me around. Hopefully, the session really helps us.
Yes, and for the people who have joined this session, we have few further steps. You can just register on Uplers, and you can find a lot of opportunities for you. You can just check it out and to get updates to many remote companies, and to ask your questions to the speakers. You can join our Discord group, which the link is shared in the chat box. And we'll keep you updated on the next sessions, and we'll share the recordings and every thing on social media and on our WhatsApp group. So thank you so much for joining. Looking forward to more such sessions with you guys. Thank you so much.